Hi everyone, James here from F9 Audio and the Freemasons, and welcome to the F9 Definitive Guide to Full Vocal Remixing. This is a three-part video tutorial during which we will create a remix from start to finish. For the purposes of these three videos, we're going to be working in Logic Audio and in house music, but please note, everything I'm going to show you here is transferable to any other major DAW and into any style of music, because we're going to be concentrating on the vocals, how you use them, how you can manipulate them, and most importantly, how you support them whilst you're completing a full vocal remix. Obviously, to do this, we're going to need some sounds, and we're going to be using two sample packs so that any of you can follow along should you wish to. The first is Katherine Ellis's excellent Diva acapellas, available right now on Loopmasters. The second is F9's Drumtrax Volume 4, a collection of high-end drum stems that have been perfectly produced, mixed and arranged to work together and then stem mastered at Wired Masters. And that means that we can fly through on this project and create an arrangement really quickly. Now, we are going to heavily edit this video. We just really want bullet points here. You don't want me looking through plugin lists trying to find sounds, etc., etc. This is all about working with the vocals. And the first problem is this. We have an acapella that we are going to be using for remix. What do we do with it? Okay, for me, remixing is all about the preparation. And before you start, always try to make sure you've got everything that you need. So if you're remixing someone else's track that you know, or you have contact with, or you have contact with their record company, get as much as possible. Always ask to have the full acapella as it appears on the record. There should be one knocking about. If not, it's dead easy for them to bounce one down. Here's this example.
I've been so lonely since you went away. I've been so lonely without you every day.
So as you can hear that it's mixed, it sounds great, it's got presence and it's got the effects on it. I'm also got here, now this is because we've obviously got hold of the sample pack from Loopmasters, I've got the dry lead vocals and the dry backing vocals, and they're separate.
I've been so lonely since you went away. I've been so lonely without you every day. I've been so alone, feeling so alone.
These can be incredibly useful because there may come a part later on where you just go, oh, I kind of want it, but I just want the lead vocal there, or I just want the backing vocals. Having them separate is fantastic. And it also means that if you're doing lots of tempo changes, when you tempo change a full acapella with reverb and effects in it, the granulated structure of time stretch stuff may not actually do a particularly good job. So time stretching dry vocals and then affecting them later on will always give you a better result. But you may not have access to those dry parts. So we're going to look here at the initial stages of using either and or. Okay, now before we go any further, I just want to have a quick word about levels. This is the acapella and you can see it looks loud. Let's have a look at the meters as it plays back.
I've been so lonely since you went away.
Yeah, it's through the roof. We're peaking at about -3 there. That's going to be way too hot to work with. We're either going to have to work with our fader all the way down here whilst we're programming, or we're going to have to change the level. Now, I'm going to use Logic's part gain control here, and I'm going to actually, let's just not muck about, we're going to take it down by 8 dB. That looks massive.
I've been so lonely since you went away.
But that should still cut through on a mix as we're working, but still give us plenty of headroom. Now, I'm just going to quickly look at our individual leads here and see how they're peaking.
I've been so alone, feeling so alone. I've been so lonely, I miss you every day. I've been...
Okay, we could do with knocking them down just a couple of dB just to make sure that we've got plenty of room. And there's going to be a recurring theme in this video. Get the work done early so you don't have to worry about it later on. Okay, so that's the level sorted. Now let's have a look at the actual timing. And the first thing to do is to listen through to the vocal. I can't believe how many people don't actually do this. Listen through to the acapella and find the rhythm that you know works with it. Now, if you know the original, you'll have a reference point, but you should be able to listen to this and actually be able to find the rhythm. And I'm going to use this rim shot sound just to play along with the rhythm of this vocal. So there's no metronome on, we're just playing through, trying to find the vocal's natural rhythm.
I've been so lonely since you went away. I've been so lonely without you every day. I've been so alone, feeling so alone. I've been so lonely, I miss you every day. I've been so lonely since you went away.
Now, I can't stress how important this is, because if you don't have a handle on what's known as the meter or the rhythm of the vocal, you could put the whole thing in the wrong place. And it amazes me how many times I hear remixes where the vocals are a quarter bar out or a half bar out and people think that they're right. Don't accept the start time of the file. This may not actually be the exact start of the a cappella. You may have to do some moving about to actually get this to line up in the first place. Okay, so to actually start to time this up so that it works within your sequencer, now we need one key piece of information. What is the BPM of the a cappella? So there's a variety of ways to get that vital piece of information, and I've got a little list here that starts with the easiest and ends with the most difficult. Now, first of all, file or folder. Is the BPM written into the file name? Now, if we just come up here and have a look at the audio region in this logic arrangement, we can see the number 123. So that is probably going to be the BPM. So we can assume the BPM of this file is 123. Now, if it's not written on the audio file, perhaps it's written on the folder that actually encloses it. This may seem incredibly basic, but I can't tell you how many people I've seen go for about an hour and a half trying to time something up without realizing they already have the BPM written on parts of the filing system. Second, do you have access to the original producer of the track? Are you remixing a friend's track? Is it someone that you've met online, etc., etc.? If so, contact them and ask them for two vital pieces of information: the BPM and the key of the track. Thirdly, if you're remixing and you've been commissioned by a record company and you don't have access to the producer, ask the record company to find that information out for you. Number 4, online. If the original is on Beatport, TrackSource, or any of the other DJ-orientated download sites, the chances are that both the tempo and the key are also encoded and available. So if you just play the preview on one of those sites, you can often see the tempo and the key next to it. So that's a perfect way to find this information out. Number 5, technology. If you use or have access to any DJ equipment, most of these will have automatic tempo detection, which will kind of read you out a figure. Now, if all of the above fails, you're just going to have to go old school and do it manually. And let me show you now my method for doing this. So we're going to take this vocal as an example, and we're going to forget that we know the original tempo of 123 BPM. Next, we're going to set the sequencer's BPM to a number that we feel may be in the right ballpark, in this case 120. Now I'm going to get the very first couple of words of the vocal in the right place.
I've been so lonely since you went away.
We don't have to worry about it drifting, because it is going to drift.
I've been so lonely since you went away. I've been so lonely without you every day.
Now you can hear the tempo, the actual metronome there is already out of time by the second vocal, but the first one is in the right position. If your first vocal is not in the right position, say it's here,
I've been so lonely since...
Work hard to get that first part of the vocal in exactly the right place. Now, you would think that the next thing to do is to time up the second line. It's not. The first thing to do after this is to try and get at least a rough tempo. Now, if your vocal is from a vinyl source or an old tape source or it's an old record, the best thing you can do at this point is split the vocal up into a variety of files. There is a very good reason for doing this. If you can get the front of an audio file in time with your sequencer and then the back end of that file in time with your sequencer, it's logical to assume that everything in between will be also in time. And in 99% of the cases, that is true. So in the case of an a cappella, we want the first set of words in the file actually to be in time, and then the last phrase in the file to be in time. But obviously, the longer that file is, the greater the margin for error. So if we chop them up into a series of smaller files, it becomes easier to do this. Okay, so I've quickly turned the 3 sections into separate audio files within Logic now, and we're going to play the first section back against Logic's metronome.
I've been so lonely since you went away. I've been so lonely without you every day.
Okay, so we can definitely hear that drifting there, and the metronome sounds slow against the vocals. Be careful of your levels when you're doing this. You don't want the vocal level too loud or you won't be able to judge it properly. So let's throw in an extreme number. Is it 128?
I've been so lonely since you went away. I've been so lonely without you every day.
No, that's definitely not right. And now the vocal sounds slow against the fast metronome. So this is where the elimination starts. We know it's not 120, we know it's not 128. How about in the middle, 124?
I've been so lonely since you went away.
Good.
I've been so lonely without you every day.
Lagging slightly.
I've been so alone, feeling so alone. I've been so lonely, I miss you every day.
Now the second level of elimination, we know it's not 124. How about we go halfway between the original 120 and 124? 122 BPM.
I've been so lonely since you went away. I've been so lonely without you every day.
Now that sounds very close, but don't be tempted to stop there. Always aim for absolute perfection at this stage, because it's going to save you a ton of time later on and a ton of headaches when you'll probably be going to be in creative mode. The way to check it is to go to the end of the file and see if that's in time. It's like the butterfly effect. Tiny variations in the tempo will cause a big effect by the end of the file.
I've been so lonely, I miss you every day.
Now we can hear that's out, so we're definitely not there yet. But when we listen to the front of the file, the acapella sounded slightly fast against the metronome. So now let's split the difference between those last two tempo. We'll go between 122 and 124, and we'll end up at 123.
I've been so lonely since you went away. I've been so alone, feeling so alone. I've been so lonely, I miss you every day.
That is banging, and now we have our static tempo of 123 BPM. Now don't expect it always to be a whole number. Don't be worried about going down to say 123.5, 123.6, even finer than that to get it absolutely right. Not all producers work in nice round tempo values, so that's why I say step 2 from the list before is always very useful. Being able to contact the original producer can save you a ton of time. So now let's put the other sections of this a cappella back in time.
I can't take it.
And I think I know where that should be. So we need to bring that in a bit.
I can't take it when we're apart. I can't fake it. You took my heart. I can't stand it another day.
Now, because we've found the static tempo that works, we should only just be having to move these sections backwards and forwards. And to fine tune it, I'm going to use Logic's region delays.
I can't take it when we're apart. I can't fake it. You took my heart.
So that section's now in time, and all you've got to do is repeat the process for all of the different parts that you've cut up previously. If the original of your record was played by a live band, and particularly before 1984 when click tracks were widespread in studios, you're going to have to do lots of little cuts because a natural drummer is just going to change tempo slightly over the period of a record. But it's worth trying to lock them all to one tempo for the next stage, which is time stretching. Okay, so we know our original vocal is at 123 BPM, but now we've got to make some big artistic decisions about what tempo we want our remix to be at, and then stretch the vocal accordingly. Now I've got this set of drums from the Drumtrax 4-pack so that we can work really quickly. They sound like this. If you've not come across the F9 Drumtrax before, this is what you get, a selection of drum stems that are all produced, ready to go, and that work together. So great for this kind of thing. But the problem is if we just drop our 1, 2, 3 vocal in there.
I've been so lonely since you went away. I've been so lonely without you every day. I've been so alone, feeling so alone.
It's going to drift like that, and that's no good. So we're going to use time stretch to get this vocal up to the tempo that we want to work at. Now, as remixers, you're going to be doing this pretty much on every project. Very rarely do the parts arrive at the tempo that you want to work at. So having a concise, accurate, and repeatable time stretch method is vital. So now let's look at doing that on most of the main DAWs. Okay, now here we are in Logic, and the most important thing is that the tempo is set correctly to the tempo of the a cappella. Do not start stretching before you've got that 100% right. We've got the full a cappella at the top and some of the individual parts a little bit later on. I'm going to want to stretch all of these. So the first thing I'm going to do is select all the tracks, click on the flex button here, and I'm going to select polyphonic. Now, polyphonic is the best general purpose real-time time stretch built into Logic. Now we're going to change some of them just back to monophonic. So I'm going to take the lead vocal, only a dry lead vocal. If anything's got effects on it, always leave it in polyphonic. And because that is just a single voice, we'll flip that over to monophonic, and the ad-lib track at the bottom. So this is all now time stretching. So let's just test it with some higher numbers. Let's just try and see if it will play back properly at 128 BPM.
I've been so lonely since you went away. I've been so lonely without you every day. I've been so alone, feeling so alone.
Let's go in the other direction. Let's see if this is stretching properly at 100 BPM.
I've been so lonely since you went away. I've been so lonely without you every day.
And it's always sensible to check all of the files individually.
I've been so lonely since you went away.
Okay, now straight away, let's save that so all of this information is saved and we've always got a point that we can get back to. So now we've got a bar-locked vocal working at the tempo that we're happy with. It's prudent to stop a little bit and just make a copy of these files. Now what I'm going to do is bounce out all of these individual files. Now in Logic, the files that are resulting from that kind of process will take on the names of the tracks. I've just renamed the tracks in Logic with a naming convention that suits me. So I've put SL for So Lonely, full acapella 124. Whatever you do, don't just put lead vocal, backing vocal, etc., etc. Mark it up with the information from the track and most importantly the new tempo that you're working on. So to do that I'm just going to quickly use Logic's export all tracks as audio files, go to the desktop and we'll create a brand new folder, So Lonely Vocals 124 BPM. Now you can't miss that, export them all. There we go. So no matter if we make mistakes from this point we can always get back to perfectly time stretched vocals working at 124. Okay, now let me show you how to lock a time stretch up inside of Ableton. Now we've got the vocals here, but most importantly, you'll notice if I click on them down in the region parameters, all of the warps are off. It is vital that you do the initial stages of that tempo evaluation with warp turned off. But there is a preference that many people leave on that you need to make sure is off. Come into your preference window, click on the record warp and launch tab and make sure auto warp long samples is turned off. If that is turned on, when you dump the vocals onto the page in the first place, Ableton will try to warp everything, get it horrendously wrong, but put warp markers in everywhere. And it's very difficult to get rid of them once they're actually in. So always make sure that that's turned off before you start doing those tempo evaluations that we saw in the Logic example. So we've done the same kind of thing here. We know that it's 123 and everything is locked down. These are unwarped regions for the moment. I'm going to select everything, make sure our master tempo of Ableton from a project level is at 123, the correct tempo, and then I'm going to click the warp button. And I'm going to turn the time stretch mode for each of the parts to Complex Pro. This is the only time stretch mode I would recommend for vocals, by the way. The number of times I've seen people come in and their stuff's all time stretched with beats and it can sound horrific in places because you've got all these kind of miniature chops. This is a proper time stretch algorithm that will make vocals work well. Now we're going to turn the metronome of Ableton on and we're going to stress it again. Let's go up to 130 this time actually.
I've been so lonely since you went away. I've been so lonely without you every day.
That sounds good, but as we said before, the only way to test really is to check the end.
I've been so alone, feeling so alone. I've been so lonely, I miss you every day.
That's it, we can even try it slow. Let's try 100 BPM again.
I've been so lonely since you went away. I've been so lonely.
A few artifacts creeping in there, but we know that this is working. So we've got a good stretch. Let's take it back to the tempo that we want to work at, 124 BPM, and save. Now, we can do the same as we did earlier by creating a backup here. I'm just going to turn all the different channels on. Going to select a good chunk of region that covers all of the acapella. Come up to Ableton's export audio and video, and where it says rendered track at the top, I'm going to change that to all individual tracks, and most importantly I'm going to say create analysis file. What that will do, we'll write one of those .asd files next to the WAV in the destination folder, and that means you can then drop this onto any arrangement and it will come back playing with the warps on at the tempo of that particular project. Very handy to be able to move stuff around between projects. And also a great way to just back this up. So we're going to go So Lonely Ableton 124 Vox. Now I'm going to use a prefix, so SL and underscore, and then it's going to take the track names that I've got already set up here and add them to the end. There is a banana skin inside of Reason. You can't do the tempo evaluation that we did inside of Logic inside this application because Reason has a real-time time stretch engine running pretty much all the time. I've still not found a way to turn it off. Maybe one of you guys do. But what you have to do is set the project tempo to the tempo that you know the vocals are at before you insert them, because Reason will write that as the master tempo of that file and then start time stretching from there. So we're going to set the tempo of this project to 1, 2, 3, the tempo that we know these vocals to be, and then put them on the page. Now the time stretch will work perfectly.
I've been so lonely since you went away. I've been so lonely without you every day.
Let's try it at a higher tempo. Let's try 1, 2, 6.
I've been so lonely since you went away. I've been so lonely without you every day.
I can't cover every DAW because I don't have them all installed, but this is my 6-point checklist that will work with any system that has real-time time stretch in it. If you've ever struggled with this kind of thing, follow this. First of all, place all the files of the vocals on tracks with no stretch applied. Find the tempo by the easiest method, and bearing in mind I've just shown you the really tough one if you really have to go there. Number 3, get all vocals in the right place from a musical point of view. Number 4, set the project tempo on that page to the correct tempo. Number 5, then you turn on the time stretch system. And then 6, save the project, and also as a backup if you feel like it, bounce all of the vocals out as individual files. Now here we are in Studio One, and I've already kind of moved everything around to the right tempo. Set the project tempo to the correct one for the vocals. Let's just listen.
I've been so lonely since you went away.
We're going to select all the tracks. Come up here to tempo, turn on the time stretch. We're going to use the Sound Elastic direct format, and then let's just test it by changing the tempo to 1, 2, 8.
I've been so lonely since you went away. I've been so lonely without you every day. I've been so lonely.
Okay, so we've finally done all that, and the reason I'm so pedantic about it, as I say, this is all in the planning. Now we have a perfectly set of time stretch vocals working with our drums. They sound like this.
I can't take it when we're apart. I can't fake it. You took my heart. I can't stand it another day. I can't wait till you're back in my arms again. Loving me. Holding me, oh yeah, loving me, holding me, needing me. I've been so lonely since.
So we're going to use the dry vocals in all of this work, so we've got as much mix and processing flexibility as humanly possible. The first thing I want to do before we go any further is to split the lead vocals and the backing vocal blocks up between verses and chorus. So they're quite easy to see here. I'm just literally going to cut them, and we're going to create a duplicate track. I'm going to use the duplicate track button here just to pop a new one in. Drop the verse down there so it's on its own track, and do the same with the backing vocals from the verse. The reason being is that often you're going to want to process the verse and a chorus separately, and in these days of unlimited tracks you may as well use the resources available, and it means we can apply different processing between verse sections and chorus sections.
I can't take it when we're apart. I can't fake it.
Now, just to round this first video off, and before we get into the fun stuff, which is the production, I'm going to make a series of chops on this dry ad-lib track so that I can spread them out on a MIDI keyboard and trigger them in as I see fit. So all of my chops are in. I'm going to right-click on them, and we're going to convert them to a new sampler track. Now, you can do this in a variety of different ways on different DAWs. In Logic, I'm going to select, we want to create the different zones from the regions that I've just cut. And we just call this So Lonely Ad-lib Chops. There we go. I'm going to delete the resulting MIDI file. We don't need that. But now I have an instrument.
Missing you so lonely every day. Ooh, ooh,
now I'm just going to add some delay to the resulting program.
So lonely, holding me, so long, loving me, loving me.
Now, the reason for me this is sometimes vital to add these kind of programs in is that you will have a completely different connection to the actual vocals if you can play them from a keyboard or a pad controller. For example, let me take just one of these samples and use some automated build-up to do something for an intro. Now let's take this idea one stage further. I'm going to take the lead vocal and place a series of pretty much random cuts throughout it. And I'm also going to deliberately put these cuts in the middle of phrases, so therefore in the middle of notes. This can generate some really useful cut-up vocal patches. Now, I've just found a couple of them here that might really work on top of that intro, so let me just fire them in. So I've just tied it up a little bit here, but I think we're in great shape. We've got all of the vocals working at the correct tempo, and we've already created some patches of chopped up vocals that we can use later on for different sections. This is a great starting point, and it's worth putting the effort in at this stage to make the rest of it simple. Don't forget to watch the other two videos in this series where we'll show you how to really dig in and make the most of the vocals and to get your music to work with the vocals in the best possible manner.